It's kind of crazy how many medical procedures I've had at this point in my life, and most of them have been useless. Like, they haven't really even addressed the real root causes of my problems, but they were like really invasive and no one had any problem putting me through them. Kind of barbaric when you think about it. Like, I've had 3 cystoscopies. 2 of them were under anesthesia, but they were also hydrodistention with capsaicin, hot pepper extract, instillation. So you wake up from that surgery and your bladder pelvis just feels like it's been dumped acid, burning embers have been inserted inside you. It's supposed to like dull the nerve endings. It didn't do anything. But I had it done twice because I wasn't sure if it worked the first time, and the second time my interstitial cystitis arrived, I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. I also had the unanesthetized cystoscopy, which that video got quite a few views, my comments on that. And 6 different bladder instillations. 3 of them were with a medication called cystistat done by a urologist in Spain. And then 2 of them were like the rescue cocktail instillations with like heparin and elmiron. And the third one of those I was made to catheterize myself, which was a freaking nightmare. And none of that stuff did anything. That's like 9 procedures right there with sticking stuff up my urethra, when the main problem I was dealing with was low estrogen and low hormones from the birth control pill, but no one figured that out for years. I figured it out 15 years later. I've had a laparoscopy for endometriosis because we also thought that might be causing all my urological pain, when again it was just the severe hormonal atrophy. It excised 2 small growths. But all these symptoms that I was having of both PCOS and endometriosis, which I was told it's impossible to have them both, and that's not even true. But I didn't have them both. I did have endometriosis. I did not have PCOS, but I had symptoms of both of them. And interestingly, all of those symptoms were actually related to the hypoestrogen and low testosterone states. I was in that state because I had been on low-dose oral contraceptives for over a decade, since I was 15 years old. A very young age, put on the low-dose pill, the worst kind. So in the midst of all that, like the vestibulodynia that I had, I didn't even know I had provoked vestibulodynia until way years into this. It was actually related to all the other pelvic problems. And when I was diagnosed, I was just given that label as like some incidental finding, like, oh, and by the way, you also have vulvodynia. And it was only after I cross-referenced interstitial cystitis, bladder pain, vulvodynia, vestibule pain, that I was led to the research about how the oral contraceptive pill can cause these problems. And so once I figured that out, I actually had years of not having major chronic problems and pain and not really being disabled anymore. I still had minor issues, but I could like function normally. Then I got a UTI at the beginning of COVID. It was treated improperly because they wouldn't let me in for a culture. I took my own antibiotics. I did successfully treat it, but then I gave myself a yeast infection that was then never cultured for another almost a year. And so I was again mistreated for a year with antifungals that didn't work because it was a rare yeast, not Candida albicans. And so that whole nightmare led me to see the only doctor that I could see, which was a private paid doctor in San Diego, who was very famous for this research that I had found that had helped me with getting off the pill and starting HRT. But when he started me on testosterone replacement, he failed to diagnose me with some situations that I had, like clitoral atrophy and adhesions. And so the testosterone actually had some effects there that caused further problems and caused a situation, an infection called balanitis, and then the development of keratin pearls. And so I suddenly needed this invasive procedure there. And that procedure, something really bad happened to one body part, one piece of tissue. My right clitoral frenulum was damaged. It was stretched and crushed. I can actually point to photos I was given of the procedure where that is happening. And visibly afterwards, you could see that it was 3 times the size of my left and swollen and painful to the touch, and the tissue was all bubbly and weird. But no one really believed me. I mean, the best I got was like, oh, I can see it, but I don't know what it is, or it looks like neurogenic inflammation, but I won't remove it for you and I can't do anything about it. And then the worst was like, oh, everything looks normal. That's anatomical variation. There's nothing wrong with you. And then that pain turned into pudendal neuralgia over time. Well, actually, immediately I had pain along my pudendal nerve. I didn't know what it was yet. And also my genitofemoral nerve. Genitofemoral, I don't know how to say these words. I just read them in papers. But over time, with sitting, wearing pants, pressure and compression on this hypersensitive tissue that I believe became ischemic, so it was cut off from blood supply and hypooxygenated during this procedure. And then maybe there's I can't remember the name for it, perfusion or something, where the blood rushes back in after tissue's been constricted. that can also damage the tissue and lead to dysesthesia, which is what I've had for the last 3.5 years. And there's really nothing anyone can do about it. I've now had 2 attempts to excise to cut off the tissue of my right clitoral frenulum, and they both haven't gotten all of it, and you can visibly see what's left. It's redder than the surrounding tissue. It's, the surrounding tissue you touch with a Q-tip doesn't hurt. It's fine. 99% of my area is fine. I have this tiny area of redder tissue now that is just still feels like burning with the lightest brushing, lightest touch. But because no one really believed that and no one's really examined me closely, there's no protocol for examining clitorises with like magnification and bright light to prove this. There's no history of this injury happening to anyone else on the planet. People have just been insisting that I have some other generic type of pudendal nerve injury, which there's no evidence to believe I have that. I've not had a fall, not a horseback rider, not a cyclist, didn't have a major abdominal surgery after which this pain started, didn't have childbirth or a C-section or any of these other common causes of PN. My pelvic floor has been like thoroughly assessed and treated. I've had 4 rounds of Botox. So to treat my pudendal neuralgia, I've had a transgluteal pudendal nerve block, a transvaginal pudendal nerve block, a dorsal branch only pudendal block. I've had periclitoral injections, a series of 3 of just lidocaine. I've had dextrose injections around that area, steroids injections multiple times as well. I've had a pulsed radio frequency ablation with a transgluteal access point of the pudendal nerve, and none of this stuff has done anything. Why? Because I still have this tissue that was damaged and is visibly different than the surrounding tissue, and I can point to it and poke where it hurts, and none of what any doctors are doing has anything to do with that. So of course none of it has helped. But I've also gaslit myself and been gaslit by most of my doctors for years of this journey. So I've also done things like ketamine infusions. I think I logged like 14 hours of that. It did nothing. I've had so many other treatments I'm probably not even remembering right now. None of them have really helped because there's a physiological thing that is the cause of the problem that isn't getting touched. And as long as it's there, I think I'm going to continue to have this disabling, constant pain.